Chapter 7 The Biddy Stove. Although Laurie cried herself to sleep that night, the next morning she woke up feeling as cheerful as the sunshine that crowded through the lilac bushes into her window. Hattie was singing in the kitchen, and Henry was banging the milk buckets on the back porch. Laurie got out of bed without being called and ran down the stairs. This morning she would tell Hattie that she never ate eggs at home, and to please not cook one for her breakfast. But she didn't quite have the courage, as Hattie had already selected the biggest egg and was about to break it into the pan. Henry was preparing to leave for the village, and Hattie whispered to him as he stepped out the door. "I'm sure they'll have one for her at Wilkins' General Store," she said, as Laurie listened with a prick of curiosity. Laurie dried the dishes and followed Hattie around the house, offering to help. "Make up your bed, child," said Hattie, "and then run out to play. Go to the barn if you like. It makes me nervous to have someone at my heels all the time." Laurie made her bed and wrote a letter to her mother. Then she went out into the yard. What could she play? There were no toys and no playmates, just acres of green lawn and pasture, blooming flowers, and a gurgling brook at the lower edge of the yard. Laurie went almost to the barn. Then she remembered the cow, the great horned cow who might even now be in the dark inner area of the barn. She turned back and sat down timidly on the front step and watched a bumblebee buzz from lilac to lilac. Once a car came down the road. It was the postman. He slowed down and waved, but he didn't stop. Would someone find Kathleen and mail her? Would the postman bring Kathleen to the mailbox someday? "There's nothing to do," thought Laurie unhappily. She felt a mournful ache for Kathleen and her mother. Her mother she would see again, but Kathleen was gone, probably forever. "Laurie, Laurie," Hattie called. "Here I am," answered Laurie, hastening up the steps. "Run, fetch me some jars from the attic," said Hattie. "You'll find them on the shelf at the head of the stairs. I want to start getting ready for chokecherry juice." Laurie was so happy to have something to do that she forgot to feel scared when she climbed up the cobwebby steps. "There isn't much light," she thought, blinking her eyes to get them accustomed to the semi-darkness. The only light came from tiny windows in the eaves. At first, Laurie did not see the shelf. She fumbled to the top of the stairs and walked toward the windows, completely passing the shelf of jars. Then she forgot the jars in her excitement at seeing the vague objects around her take shape. There were trunks and boxes, a bird cage, and a dress form. There was a hoop skirt hanging on a nail, and on a low shelf in front of Laurie was a tiny stove. It was a miniature old-fashioned black iron stove, just like the one in the kitchen downstairs, with a really truly firebox and a chimney. There was a little damper and an ash drawer where the ashes fell. "Oh!" squealed Laurie, dropping to the floor beside it. "Why, it's so little I could use matchsticks for firewood in it." On top of the stove were a tiny iron skillet, a little iron pot, a diminutive tea kettle, and beside it, the stove, was a tiny wood bucket and a poker and a shovel. Laurie fingered them lovingly. "Yoo-hoo, Laurie!" called Hattie from the bottom of the stairs. Laurie jumped up guiltily. She had forgotten all about the jars. Now that her eyes were accustomed to the darkness, she could see them plainly on the shelf at the head of the stairs. "I'm coming," she cried, quickly pulling 6 of the jars from the shelf. "Don't run with them," called Hattie. "I just wondered if you were caught in a spider web." Laurie balanced the 6 jars in her arms and walked carefully down the steep stairs. "Oh, Hattie, guess what I—" "So you found the Biddy stove, did you?" said Hattie. "Things you find unexpectedly are more fun than things that are handed to you, aren't they? Would you like to bring it down and play with it?" "Oh, could I?" begged Laurie. She handed Hattie the jars and skipped back up to the attic. She gathered the tiny stove and the utensils in her arms and brought them down to the kitchen. Laurie put the little stove on the floor beside the big stove and knelt down in front of it. "This stove is the most something so stove I ever saw," said Laurie, looking from the big stove to the little one. "Where did you get it, Hattie?" "It belonged to my mother," said Hattie. "She got it for her birthday years ago. Then she gave it to me when I was about your size." "You took good care of it," said Laurie. "You didn't lose any of it." "That's right," said Hattie. "The Biddy stove was always my treasure." Laurie thought with a stab in her heart of her treasured Kathleen and of her own carelessness. "There now," said Hattie, reading Laurie's mind. "No use crying over spilled milk. Put your Biddy stove here close to the big one, and I'll let you build a fire in it." Laurie delightedly took some tiny strips of paper and wadded them inside the firebox. On top of that she put some splinters of wood, as she had seen Hattie do. "Open your dampers," said Hattie, as she peered over Laurie's shoulder. Laurie opened the miniature dampers and then lit a match and poked it inside the stove. "It really works," she cried. "Look, Hattie, it really works. Could I cook something in it?" Smoke curled out of the chimney, and the oven of the bitty stove began to grow hot. "Put a little dough in the skillet, and you can bake some bread," said Hattie. Laurie spooned out a thimbleful of dough into the little skillet and put it inside the stove. "What's cooking?" asked Henry as he walked in the door. "Mercy me, I didn't hear you come in," said Hattie. "Look at the bitty stove," cried Laurie. "It's baking bread." "There's something for you in the truck, Laurie," said Henry with a smile. "Go fetch the packages from the front seat." Laurie raced out of the kitchen. Maybe it was Kathleen. Maybe Henry had seen the bus driver or the postman, or in some miraculous manner he had found Kathleen. With Kathleen in the bitty stove, everything would be almost perfect. Oh, the bitty stove was just the right size for Kathleen. Laurie jerked open the door of the truck. There were a few paper-wrapped parcels on the front seat, and in plain view was a small plastic doll with a painted dress and painted shoes and hands and hair. It was a stiff, unbending doll, and on top of her head was a slot for coins. "What an ugly doll," thought Laurie. "Why, it's a bank. Who would want to play with her? You couldn't dress her or move her or snuggle her close." Laurie searched through the packages, but there was no Kathleen. Then she knew that this ugly doll was meant for her. It was a present from Henry. He had brought her this doll to take the place of Kathleen. She took the packages in one hand and the doll in the other and walked slowly toward the house. She tried to make herself feel thankful for the doll. Henry was watching expectantly from the door. With an effort, Laurie put a little spring in her step and a stiff smile on her face and tried to clasp the doll happily, for Henry's sake. "Thank you so much," said Laurie as heartily as she could. Then she laid the doll on the chair and went back to the itty-bitty stove, where the little pan of bread was getting brown on top.